All right, so welcome to the August meetup. I'm Serge, for those of you who are new. We're just going to get right into it. Give me 1 second here. So what's new? First up, we're going to talk about iOS, tvOS, watchOS updates, macOS Sierra updates, the Office updates, Jamf updates, security roundup of things that have happened since our last meeting, which was June, some item of interests, and a bit of conferences. Conferences coming up. So first up, iOS 10 updates. So iOS 10.3.3 was released, I think it was last month? Yes. Lots of bug fixes. 47 CVs affecting 17 processes. For those of you who are particularly concerned about it, this patch fixes the broad phone vulnerability. You want to make sure that if you have a fleet of iOS devices, you make sure you're on 10.3.3 just to be sure. I don't know if there's actually been a in the wild exploit, but it's certainly possible. Going to tvOS and watchOS updates. 10.2.2 was also released at the same time. Again, another just bug fixes and performance improvements. Lots of the same CVEs and processes that are affected in iOS. Also brought own fixes for tvOS on Apple TV and presumably on watchOS. I think that's just Bluetooth, not Wi-Fi. watchOS 3.2.2, same deal, mostly bug fixes, no new features. And OS Sierra. So 10.12.6 was released last month. Again, this lot of bug fixes, including closing the broad phone vulnerability. As I'll discuss in detail later, this only applies to Sierra. It does not apply to El Capitan or Yosemite. So if you're worried about that exploit in the wild, that hasn't happened yet, or just want to be absolutely sure you're on top of things, upgrade to 10.12.6 is recommended, highly recommended. Also, it resolves an issue that prevents making certain SMB connections from the Finder. Fixes an issue with XA clients unexpectedly restarting. And improved stability of the terminal line. Nothing specific other than improved stability of the terminal line. That may be a Tmux thing. So I think there was an issue with it opening too many connections. Or am I thinking something else? But anyway, the details are on the list that tells you about what the bug fixes are. And the security, and the link under security details will tell you which affected processes were affected for that if you want more information. This build also unifies all the builds for the 2017 Macs that were released this year. So 10.12.6 will boot all the 2017 Macs as well as everything else that came before. Office 2016, while we were away, Office 2016, 15, 36, and 37 were released. There were fixes to all the applications, and there are some new features added as well. Most new features, as always, only go to the O365 subscribers. on-prem or volume license subscriber clients probably won't see them for a while. I don't think they've ever said what their determination for that is when a feature will come to volume license. But basically, they kind of want you to be on their 365. So, and that's, I guess, their carrot for that. There was one update for Office 2011, 14.76. That's just basically security updates, closing subhomes. We are now a little less than 2 months, a little over 2 months away from 2011 being end of life forever. So, and there was an update for Skype for Business. The big thing here, it adds additional Link 2013 server support. So you can actually do things with the Link 2013 clients. So going over to Jamf Pro. So Jamf Pro Server 9100 was released last month on the 20th, so almost a month ago. This release has compatibility with, initial compatibility with High Sierra, iOS 11, and tvOS 11. So if you're testing any of that and you're testing your workflows, you want to be on 9100 for maximum effectiveness on that testing. Some of the new features include the option to require tethered connections for app installation. That's very not good. Native expect as criteria for macOS, and granular re-enrollment settings for Macs and mobile devices. That's a new feature as well. They made changes now. So in 9100, all the SSL certs issued by the internal CA now include the subject alternative name for Chrome compatibility. Since Chrome, I think the future version will reject any cert that does not have a subject alternative name as part of the profile, the cert. And so there's lots of product issues and defects closed in this one. And moving on, Hexpocalypse. So if you've been testing High Sierra in the betas, you might have run into the secure kernel extension loading feature that they've introduced in this. Basically what that means is that users will be prompted to enable checks that get installed on the system. And so that prompt shows up. It's like a very small, kind of very nondescript, also kind of sketchy looking. And it's not very detailed. So, and all it does is just basically redirects you to security and privacy. And if you go in security, like you do in File Vault, it will have a little triangle alert that tells you that to allow this extension, right? That from whatever the team ID is listed on the signing cert for the kernel extension, which may or may not be very clear to a user. You also have about 35 minutes to approve the kernel extension. 30 minutes to approve the kernel extension. Otherwise, it's permanently disabled. You'll either have to reinstall or do a kekstat or something else to re-enable it. You get basically re-enable and re-prompt for the kernel extension.
No, there's no automation around this.
There is no automation around this. Yes, I'll say that again. There's no automation around this. Apple has provided a way to whitelist, but it requires, like SIP, booting from a separate file. So it's possible if you're still imaging traditionally to preset a whitelist for secure kernel extensions. But if you're doing depth or any kind of thin provisioning, thin imaging, there's no way around it. So, at least not at this point. So the good news is that anybody who upgrades, any kits that are currently installed are automatically whitelisted during the upgrade. So, so your existing fleet, when they upgrade to High Sierra, will probably be okay. New deployments will be problematic if you're not doing traditional imaging, as well as in case you need to do an upgrade outside of imaging, that will also be problematic. Or if you have to install a new piece of software for whatever reason, this will also affect that as well. Yes?
Also, if you reset the PRAM because it's stored in the NVRAM.
Yes.
So resetting the PRAM clears your whitelist that you set overnight.
Yes.
From recovery.
So if you do this, you basically have to instruct your help desk to never zap the PRAM. So this affects all third-party vendors that install a kernel extension. That includes security products like Symantec or Carbon Black. It includes virtualization software like Parallels and VMware Fusion, audio-visual software that installs a kernel extension, any hardware software that's like printer drivers, HP printer drivers that install Kext. I think Logitech still installs Kext for some of their products. So yeah, I mean, even things like, Little Snitch is affected. So yeah, this is kind of a big deal. So I mean, Apple has long wanted people to not use kernel extensions, but for some of the things that the software vendors do, they can only be done in kernel extensions at this point, because either the framework isn't mature enough or they have no framework to use to basically follow Apple's desired protocol, like call a framework to do something. So,
has everyone here opened a radar, a duplicate to the radar for
yes, so
complaining about this?
You should be complaining about it. You should have been complaining about this actually a month ago, but we didn't have a meeting, so I couldn't tell you to do that. But because it's pretty far along now, there's still some time left, but as of beta 6, there have been no further changes to this feature. So if you open up a radar or talk to your systems engineer, Apple systems engineer, or if you have another contact at Apple somewhere, talk to them about it. They've had plenty of conversations with a lot of us admins, as well as third-party vendors. So so basically you're just adding your voice to the chorus at this point, because it's something they're well aware of, and they've gotten a lot of feedback on. So I think I've talked to like 4 different people at Apple about this specifically. So this is kind of a big deal, and at this point we just need more voices added to the choir in order to get them to do something. Like this affects a lot of people, and I know both Google and Facebook have said if this feature rolls out and one of their Macs falls out of compliance, they can't trust that Mac. And then, if they can't trust Mac OS as a platform, they'll probably stop buying Macs. So it's kind of a big deal. So as I mentioned, not depth-free, thin imaging friendly. So I have a link up to like the full details, including some of the screenshots you'll see associated with this. Eric Gozmez wrote it up on his blog, so there's a link there. So definitely do check that out. Actually, I can probably break and show you some of those things, but we'll keep moving for now. So security roundup. We have got a lot of stuff to cover on this one. So as I mentioned, Broadcom. The vulnerability in the Broadcom Wi-Fi chipset means that any attacker may be able to remotely exploit code within a certain range, if it's in range. So, as I mentioned when we're talking about the Sierra updates and others, we're on the latest version of macOS Sierra, iOS, tvOS. The firmware for the Broadcom chips has been updated, so it's no longer affected. But as I said, it only applies to Sierra on macOS. So El Capitan and Yosemite are currently unpatched. So, and they have not, and Apple has not said whether they're going to patch that, but it's been a month since almost a month since they patched it for Sierra, and they've given no indication that they are going to do that. So, if this is a security concern, and the security team wants this to be closed, everybody has to go to Sierra at this time, anyway. So the link here has details on the exact. It's actually the exact nature of the exploit. So if you want more information, you can follow the link on that. We'll be posting the slides after the meeting for those of you who are new. The dock malware has a new variant discovered last month. This one basically been targeting banks mainly in Switzerland, but what it does is basically kills browsers, installs fake certs, and configures proxy settings to hijack any internet traffic. And this was part of, I forget the name of it, another a broader sort of attack against banks in general, which has Windows and Linux variants of this as well. So, it may. I don't think I've seen any of the reports of this outside of the banking industry and specifically Europe and I think Japan. But that was blocked by Xprotect. But I don't think this variant has been blocked yet. And so that's just something to be aware of. Other news: 1Password has decided to offer subscriptions in cloud-based vaults, which a lot of the security community has said is a very bad idea. They still offer local vaults, and that's not going away, but their new model basically wants to push everything to the cloud. So if you're a 1Password customer, this affects you greatly. If you're thinking about 1Password, you have something else to think about. No. Also, really, last month, Cisco announced that WebEx browser extensions for Chrome and Firefox had vulnerabilities that could execute arbitrary code. And Safari is unaffected because I think the way Safari and browser extensions work. But patches are currently available, so if you use WebEx in your organization, make sure that you have those patched versions for Chrome and Firefox if you use those browsers in your organization. So details on the links there as well. So Fruitfly was a backdoor. It's been around for, I would say, what they say, a decade at least, but it was only recently discovered 6 months ago. And there's been some more analysis of it recently in this past month. It was also the subject of a Patrick Wardle talk at Black Hat. I have the links here. It's described as a full-feature malware, meaning it does can capture video files, photos, and grab your files off the machine and talks to a command controller server somewhere. So Patrick analyzed it by basically setting it. It's been full-featured, but I don't think it's actually being used. It just kind of sits there. but unless I'm thinking of something else. No, that's definitely this one. But basically, Patrick, in his Black Hat talk, set up a command control server and in order to analyze the functions of this particular malware. But I don't think it's I think it was a targeted attack, and some of those, I think it's mainly hospitals, but I'm not entirely sure about that. But anyway, the details are in the links, and the link for the Patrick's Black Hat talk actually goes right to his slides. I don't think there's video posted of his talk yet. I don't even know if they actually videoed any of the Black Hat talks. So, but those are the slides if you want to take a look. They're kind of advanced for some of the deep dive stuff he does, but like you can get an overall sense of what it does. In other news, Flash has officially been end of life at the end of 2020. So we have less than, more than 2 years left of Flash, which hopefully is enough time for everybody to get off Flash. So,
more than 2 years of Flash updates. Flash.
We still have more than 2 years of Flash updates to do. But hopefully, as it gets close to the end of life, there won't be a lot of Flash out in the wild left anymore by the time that happens. Hopefully. So another thing up there is that apparently there's a way to exploit printers through PostScript. So yes, so it's another thing for why printers suck. So the details for this particular exploit, which I can't recall the details of right now, are in the link, but that's something to look at. Hopefully we'll see people patching very shortly. Another talk that Patrick Morgan made at Black Hat was talking about how the macOS installers and updates are a cesspool of exploits waiting to happen. So it's kind of involved, and it's very detailed on that. So I didn't post a summary up, but again, links to his slides are there. Basically, the updaters, everybody's doing it wrong. And the installers, again, people are doing it wrong. That's the TLDR for that. But details are in Patrick's slides. So please do check those out, and then talk to the vendors about closing those holes. So you want to try to avoid any sort of Kaspersky security products at least in the short term. A lot of detail about, I guess, Kaspersky's founder being ex-KGB has been hitting the news lately. So, and in the current political climate, and also that all Kaspersky products are banned from U.S. government computers, may give you pause to install any of theirs, especially since they made one of their security products free to all users, I think within the last month. So,
somebody worse than John McAdmins.
Potentially, yes. So another exploit potentially is how to steal files from macOS by Safari downloads. According to this particular article, it's Apple doesn't see it as much as an exploit as a feature, or at least they don't see potential for the exploit. So not something that's been closed yet. They don't consider it an exploit at this point. Mainly because some of the things still require admin access. So you need to be able to get all that first before you can actually exploit this. But the walkthrough is pretty detailed. And finally, so white hats can still be arrested. Malware Tech, one of the guys who helped stop the Petya virus and its variants of WannaCry, was arrested at Black Hat for supposedly his role in
creating banking
Right,
malware.
for bank malware.
Back in 2012.
Right, back many years ago. So, again, no good deed goes unpunished.
Did you see the guy who stopped, what was the recent, what was that recent one where it was doing a DNS lookup to see if a website did?
That was WannaCry.
Yeah, that was
That
one.
was the one? Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, that was one right. So, items of interest. If you use Chrome, Duo Labs has released a couple of phishing tools. Is This Legit and Fin. Is This Legit basically is an extension, Chrome extension that does, in a very basic sense, comparisons to make sure that something is actually legit. And Fin is sort of a more ambitious project that kind of uses a bit of machine learning to kind of determine what things could or could be malicious. So I'm categorizing it mostly wrong, I guess, because I'm just relying on my memory because I was writing this up real fast. But there's definitely two things you want to check out. That was an issue from last month that I didn't take out. Nomad 1.5 has been released for those of you who use Nomad, which I think is a large part of this group. If you don't know what Nomad is, it's basically allows you to do binding to AD without binding code. So it will help reset an AD password. It will basically do notifications when your password's going to expire, change the password, and it can do more than just that.
Kerberos.
What? Kerberos. Yes. You will renew your Kerberos ticket. So, and you just have to be connected to the network. So, no logging out and logging back in.
We had Joel Rennick.
We did have Joel Rennick here a couple months ago, yes. Yes. Very fun guy.
It was our first meetup ever.
Yes. Monkey 303 was also released for those of you who use Monkey. We did not, as you asked, actually do a write-up about Monkey 3 being released. That was a couple of months ago.
Yeah, he released it at Mac DevOps by YVR.
So that's like about June-ish. So
it should have made the June one.
Should have made the June one, but we missed that. So yeah, so lots of new features in Monkey 3 for those of you who use Monkey. And it's definitely worth checking out if you're looking for alternatives to how you're doing patch management right now. So Microsoft also released some utilities for Outlook. All the apps that they've released though are unsigned. So they're trying, but this is kind of like an easily fixable mistake. But I guess these utilities aren't being released out of the official channels, so that's probably why they're unsigned. So Malwarebytes 3.0 was released. This is a freemium product. The freemium version will disinfect a Mac, and for 30 days you'll have access to any updates that might come on, the always-on scanning, and I think one other thing as well. But after 30 days, you have to give them money to continue to use that. So that's worth checking out since Malwarebytes is Thomas Reed's the main driver behind the Malwarebytes for Mac version. He's been doing very good work for many years. And conferences, these are upcoming conferences. PSU MacAdmins was last month, and now the videos from all the talks that were allowed to be recorded are now available on YouTube, on their YouTube channel. So lots of good talks on there this year. There was a lot of times where you had to pick one and miss one. If you went to one, you're gonna miss another good one that was happening at the same time. So it was a very tough schedule this year. If you have not been to PSU MacAdmins, That's something you definitely want to consider for next year, especially for people here. It's not that far away. It's a 3-hour drive at the most, and and we have pretty much some of the best and brightest coming in and talking from all over the world. So, and it's a really good conference. There's more coming. There's more. So MacAdmins is coming in October. That's in Sweden. So getting out to Sweden is probably a little outside the budgets for most of us, but it's definitely where some very good talks happen. Videos from MacAdmins are always posted after the conference within a couple of weeks. And they also get some of the major figures in the community speak at MacAdmins, so those talks will always be good.
In English?
In English, yes. It's being held in Sweden, but the conference language will be English for the most part.
Good.
And it's about $1,300.
And of course, the Jamf Nation User Conference will be at the end of October this year. It's in their new location at the Hyatt, which is attached to the conference center, the Minneapolis Conference Center. Later in October means it might be a little colder than if you've gone to prior JNOCs. So this might be the first year where people use the Skyways to get around downtown. So, but the links here for all those conferences for more information if you want. And in the last conference for the year that's officially listed, that's specifically Mac focused, is the Mac Tech Conference in November. This one's held out in LA. They also have a trading day on the 14th that you have to pay extra for to get something. I think usually it's like you can get a Microsoft Office certificate or maybe something else. I know in years past, when Apple still did certifications for ACTC and ACSA, you could get those done there. I think you can do the basic certifications now there too, maybe even some of the break-fix certs. Yeah, so that's one in LA. That's one I haven't been to yet. Maybe at some point. So those are the upcoming conferences. And since he's still not here yet, Ben was going to do a primer on Active Directory for us. But at this point, we'll just open up to just open discussion for things. If you want to talk about anything that I brought up or something else you want to bring up, we can do that now. Anybody want to talk about something?
What I miss?
You'll see.
Well,
live stream.
I was going to touch. Oh, there's Ben. Yeah. I was going to touch on the Broadcom thing. It's one of the first, well, one of the few vulnerabilities on the Mac that you don't have to do anything at all. You don't need to have your wireless turned on the OS. You don't need to try to connect to anything. Just having the network card in your computer and powered is enough to do the exploit.
Yes. Really? When I said in range, that's exactly what I mean. You just have to be in range, regardless of whether the device is on or off. I think if there's power to the device at all, even if it's in a technically off state, the Wi-Fi chip is still active.
Yep. So that's one of the reasons why they're pushing so hard on the Broadcom to be fixed, is because, well, mainly on the mobile devices, because you can walk into Starbucks and then all of a sudden your phone is compromised.
Yeah. So basically, if you have a device that does not run iOS 10 or cannot run iOS 10, this exploit can still affect that device. So I think that's what iPhone 5 and below.
No, 5 will still run iOS 10.
Will 5 run?
Yeah, it's the 4S and below.
4S and below. So yes, so if you have anybody, so if there's any 4S devices or anything of that vintage in your organization,
Get rid of it.
yes, you might want to retire those and upgrade.
Yeah, I think the 5S is gonna miss the iOS 11 cutoff. Or the 5.
The 5 is, definitely.
Yeah,
The 5S is, because that was when they went
5C.
5 and 5C are.
Yeah, 5 and 5C are gone.
Anyone without touching.
Still going.
Yeah.
5S still going. 3 hours of battery life.
I still see people with 4Ss. One of the guys that one of the guys at the CTT or CCT. There we go, CCT. One of the guys at the CCT, he had an iPhone 4S, and then another guy had like an iPhone 5. Well, one guy said he just upgraded from the iPhone 3GS.
We had an iPad one come in a couple weeks ago, and someone was like, "Hey, what can we do with this?"
Trash.
You shaking your head.
We got 30 iPad ones that were up until like a month ago used as loaner devices. Yeah.
They're built like tanks, though. I mean,
Oh, they're built like
Oh,
tanks.
if somebody comes in, you could really hurt somebody. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know where some of these people like are still using some of this stuff. But they,
the 6 apps that work on it, like,
It's called K-12.
yeah.
So I have an iPad too, and I'm sitting there, it's painfully slow trying to do stuff. I'm like, and you're just gonna be a picture thing.
What's
for
the
now.
last OS for the iPad one also? Isn't it like iOS 5?
It's like 5, yeah. It's ancient. Half the apps don't run. About the only like people I can genuinely say, hey, you might want this is you have like a 6 or 8-year-old kid that you don't want using your iPad. Like, here, browse the internet.
Or like you said, picture frame.
there's a marvelous calculator.
Yeah. A couple years ago, Best Buy was giving away $200 if you traded in any iPad that worked.
Yeah.
So I had an iPad 1 that I won as a raffle gift that I never used. And I was like, I don't need it. And I gave me 20 bucks.
Not too shabby.
So cash for clunkers.
Basically. So you do.
So, might as well.
All right.
Yay.
And you're live.
Huzzah! Hour and 40 minutes of travel time later.
Hope it was worth it. You have to hang with us.
That's worth it.
It's nice.
Let's hope all the rewrites I did on my presentation the last 15 hours are worth it.
Also, for what it's worth, we have stickers here, you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Billy MacAdmins stickers.
Noted.
With our cool
And
Billy
pizzas.
Just a shout out.
MacAdmins logo.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
The light taken out of it.
I just like the feet.
Crash plan.
Yeah, Crash Plan is trying to push me onto the small business service. But that's because I have one device that's backup archive is hovering around 7.2 terabytes.
Hey, so you might want to look into this.
Actually, the deal they're running is pretty good.
I just bought my first VPN.
Yeah, so did I.
2 years for $70.
Mine's $10 a month.
I think $70 we get 2 years for.
Ooh, yeah.
Or NORD VPN.
Do they log anything?
No. I can send you a link with the code.
It took me 4 days.
So
50% off.
I use
3 times every day.
IP Vanish.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard.
Directly in the line drops.
I heard. I was going through a lot of them, and Nord does a. They don't do logging, so I was like, I'm going to take that. If anybody needs it, though,
We were just talking about people sticking stuff on the rack.
But it's been good so far. It's fast.
Yeah.
Like I'll get off the record. I'll get like 2 megabytes a second or 1.4 to 2 megabytes a second.
You get that when you go?
Oops.
You mean clicking on like the go to VPN?
NordVPN.com.
Are you on a VPN right now?
No.
Yeah, look, I get it too, but I would.
I would be to you today.
Oh, wait. Who's assigned by? If it's VeriSign or Symantec. Issued by Cisco Umbrella Secondary Sub CA.
It's the Cisco Umbrella is the
I literally just went to the website.
DNS filtering service.
Like I literally just went to the website, and now it's saying it's not private.
What changed?
Me.
All of the awesome things.
That's who I went with. And if you do a Google search for NordVPN, like 70% off, you'll find plenty of coupons.
I had no case.
All right. All set?
Yeah.
Cool. So, in getting back to some of our 101 type presentations, MacAdmins introduction to Active Directory. Now, this is going to be old hat for some of you, but hopefully you'll have some new information. So, here we go. So, who am I? Come on, there we go. My name is Ben Rush. I am a technical consultant in Interface Systems. We're a small managed service provider out of Bluebell. I've been in the MacAdmin community servicing Macs for nigh on to 20 years. So, had a whole host of experience with Active Directory from when Macs didn't understand what the hell it was at all to more recently when we've got a whole boatload of options. Start off with, what is Active Directory? Well, Active Directory is a collection of services that is bundled into basically the core of Microsoft's server products infrastructure. You've got your domain service. This is, oops. Awesome. And it lost my notes. Okay. So the domain service, which is the interface for other devices to connect to Active Directory's own services. The domain service is actually the domain controllers themselves. This is what most devices talk to initially when trying to authenticate to a variety of different services within Active Directory. In addition to that, you've got your lightweight directory service, or direct LDAP. Actually, is what is how most devices talk to this, and again, authenticated back via the domain service. And the lightweight directory is your access to your user database. Active Directory also contains your certificate store and certificate distribution mechanism. Public key infrastructure, generally designed as on-prem, although I've heard that ADFS in the cloud may be using, maybe modifying that so that it is available in the cloud. It can distribute certificates that way. You've got your rights management services. This is built upon the users and groups database. This allows you to assign access rights, either explicit allow or explicit deny, and federation services. And this is what allows other services to authenticate against AD, be it Exchange, other mail services, web services, file services, etc. So, to some new in this field, what does that have to do with Macs? Well, Macs can take advantage of all this. They have been able to for quite some time. But since macOS 10.3, Apple has included an Active Directory plugin, which interfaces with the built-in directory systems in the macOS, allowing Macs to authenticate against Active Directory, obtain credentials, utilize credentials, allowing you to log in with your Microsoft Windows credentials to the Mac as a user, and also authenticate to any federated services. And offering a lot of that single sign-on to other applications, although that was a later development. So as far as the built-in Active Directory plugin goes, this is OS level integration, and sometimes referred to as strict binding these days in the advent of casual binding, which I'll get to in a second. So strict binding at the OS level means that you establish a trust relationship between the local operating system and the Microsoft directory, allowing any authorized Microsoft user to log into the local system, and the Mac OS will trust it as a local account. Sorry. So, as far as manual binding goes, as most of you probably know, a couple of fairly simple mechanisms for this. First is through the GUI in System Preferences, Users and Groups, and on the login accounts, and then there's Network Account Server. You just enter that, enter appropriate Active Directory credentials, usually any account with rights to bind to the domain. That will bind the OS to the domain, set up the trust relationship, set up the computer account if there isn't already one, which auto-generates its own password, and adds itself to the default organizational unit, or OU, within the domain. And most of that is handled fairly smoothly and automatically. But using this mechanism, you don't have a lot of granular control. If you still choose to use the GUI, but you need more control than that, you can utilize the directory utility, which is located in System Library, Core Services, and Applications in more recent versions of the Mac OS. This utility will give you many more options, allow you to define a lot more variables in the bind process, and even specify regions of the forest that you need to bind to. But it is not the most granular mechanism available to you. That would be via the command line through bash, the dsconfig.ad tool. And through this, you have all of the options that Apple has seen fit to provide for us. With this tool, which can be scripted, you can define a whole host of options and a whole host of limitations for that particular machine. However, all of these methods, if you're binding more than, say, I would say 4 Macs to the domain, are extremely cumbersome, which brings us to automated binding. So again, we have dsconfig.ad, which can be scripted either using some sort of built-in mechanism to an imaging service similar to Deploy Studio, if any of you have ever used that, that leverages dsconfig.ad. Or in some cases, you can have a script run at first boot after being imaged or otherwise initially prepared. So with that, you can enter the script, have it run at startup, have it bind to the domain, and once it's finished and all of your other preparations are made, hand it over to the user and they can log in with appropriate rights. So the other method is via configuration profile, which is something that Apple has provided for us relatively recently. Using this is probably one of the simpler methods. The AD payload for configuration profiles is built into Profile Manager if you choose to use that. But it's also built into a whole host of MDM systems, and if you configure the profile elsewhere, it can be deployed using Monkey or other management tools. And with that, You can define just as much as you could, nearly as with dsconfig AD, and also make changes to those options later on should you need to, although it's not always recommended. It can break things, but doesn't always. Which then brings me to casual binding, which is something that's come in more recently. And casual binding is integrating with Active Directory in user space rather than the entire machine. One of the initial drawbacks to that is you must already have a local user account to utilize casual binding. But it avoids some of the pitfalls. It still allows you to gain access to Kerberos tickets for single sign-on for federated services. It allows for, in most cases, password synchronization between the local account and your AD account. It allows it, if you don't set up synchronization, you can still manage your AD password through these tools, and provides you with a lot of the functionality that is available in strict binding without the drawbacks, which I'll get to shortly. So there are a couple of tools out there. The two main ones are Apple Enterprise Connect, which is available through Apple Professional Services. It allows, as I mentioned, password management synchronization to the local user account, acquisition of Kerberos tickets, of machine and user account certificates, should they be available, and a handful of other things. The other tool out there, which has been gaining steam rather rapidly over the last several months, is Nomad. For those who haven't heard of it, Nomad is short for No More AD. Nomad runs similarly to the Apple Enterprise Connect product, but it also adds in a few other features. It still allows for the password synchronization. One of the nice features of it, it does also allow for to be used on bind machine or on strictly bound machines for password reminders and easier password changes. It does all of these things using built-in mechanisms, the things that the built-in AD plugin leverages, but just in user space. And one of the other advantages of Nomad, at least coming soon, is it's going to start leveraging some other things such as mounting shared files or shared folders from file systems, and actually it may already automatically initiate a VPN session if it's a VPN client that it can talk to. So when it comes time to change your password if you're off-site. So with those options out there, what can go wrong? Well, a lot. And although there's still a lot that can go wrong with AD, having been with this since almost the beginning, it's a lot better than it used to be. In 10.3, bindings broke all the time. They still do, but nowhere near as severely. So, pardon me. So the most problematic issues with AD binding, password synchronization being the first. Password synchronization between Active Directory and the local system. In many cases, I've seen where a user goes to change their password on a strictly bound system. The password updates on the local system, but it does not update Active Directory. Once you start getting that mismatch, generally within half an hour, you're going to know it because all of your services are going to start failing. Another type of password synchronization error is between the local user account and the file vault account if you have that enabled. And again, this can happen. I've seen it, actually had it happen for one of my clients fairly recently due to a time synchronization issue where it updated the local machine password, it updated Active Directory, but it did not update File Vault. So the next time the users went to reboot, they couldn't log in. And because in many cases the password had already expired, File Vault knew that, wouldn't let them log in at all. So some things to keep in mind when using that. So again, with strictly bound machines, you have broken bindings. And this is where, in most cases, where the trust relationship either breaks down between the local system and Active Directory, or in some cases, and this I used to see this quite frequently with Server 2003, where the computer record for the Mac would get corrupt and stop accepting logins. It also occurred in some cases when the Mac had been off domain for enough time that the machine account password had expired. The Macs at the time were unable to renew that once it had expired. So the only way to fix that was to delete and rebind. One of the last ones, account attribute changes. This is one not seen quite as often these days, although I've seen it a couple of times recently. And this happens a lot in instances where you are making major changes to Active Directory. I've seen it most often when you are either integrating what used to be two separate Active Directory instances into one forest, or in the process of changing domain names. In those cases, in some instances, individual user accounts, and in some cases, computer accounts, some of the finer attributes that the Windows systems will generally brush off if they change greatly affect the Mac's ability to log in. In a lot of cases, it will go so far as to break the bind, or cause very, very strange authentication issues due to incorrect Kerberos tickets or invalid Kerberos tickets. So you have users logging out and back in after these changes. All of a sudden, they're getting thrown these invalid password errors or unable to or access denied errors when trying to access file shares, or if you have AD authenticated web content, and then just password errors in Outlook for Exchange and that sort of thing. So another thing that an issue that can come up is stale user and group records. Since the Active Directory plugin often caches a user and group information, sometimes that information can become out of date, and when it tries to leverage the cache data instead of live data, you end up, again, with authentication and access errors. So can be a headache in many cases, but as I said, it's getting better. So, oops. Now, this is a question that I've heard in many forms over the years, is given all of this information, is it worth my time to integrate with Active Directory in some form? Oops. Yes. And the reason being is that it's 2017. Macs can no longer be shoved into a corner and forgotten about. So many environments that I've worked at over the years, they carved out a space for the Macs and left them there on their own to do whatever it is Mac users do, and not to touch the rest of IT systems for fear of breakage or something. The issue is that this parallel IT is unsustainable, and if teams using Macs need to integrate with any other teams in the organization, all of a sudden things start to fall apart, and your job is 10 times harder. So, in addition to which, it also brings self-sufficiency and self-reliance to a lot of the to Mac users in your organization, because they can interact with these systems on their own without IT's help. They can update their own passwords. They can manage these resources without having to call every single time, or they even have the knowledge to know what sorts of issues they're having if they need something and they haven't been cordoned off into a corner somewhere. So how do we go about integrating Macs with Active Directory? Well, in a lot of cases that is determined by your environment. So your organization may have regulations that you need to comply with. You may have company policies that have been set for particular reasons, specific to your industry, specific to a whole host of things, even physical location. You may have legal requirements. You may have any of these things. You also need to pay attention to how your Macs are being used. For example, if there are no really solid reasons or any regulations or company policies that demand strict binding, if most of your Macs are mobile and spend a significant amount of time off network, you may want to give serious research into casual binding. This would prevent issues of loss of access to the local system should the binding break, or should the AD account on the local Mac go stale or password expire without them being able to reset it. Another thing is technical supportability. Don't deploy a system you and your team cannot support, even though you might be able to support it. If the rest of your team can't support it and you get run under a bus, there will be problems, and all of a sudden you've got a whole lot of people in a lurch. So lots of things to take into account. Testing multiple solutions to find what works best. I mean, as a consultant, I can't tell you how many times I've had to do this. Although at this point, unless there is specific need, I'm recommending casual binding for most of my clients' environments, but these are also environments that are the vast minority of computing systems are Macs, and most of them are portable, but still. Look at their needs. Look at what works best for you, what is best for you to manage. Keep testing. Talk to your Active Directory administrators or admins, or unless that's you, in which case, look at both sides. Don't strictly think about the Mac. Think about what extra work this may entail on the Active Directory side. Do you need to set up separate OUs? Do you need to segregate it somehow within Active Directory or mark it in some way? Some organizations do, some organizations don't. While policies don't filter down to Macs, there are instances where if you have specific extensions to your Active Directory schema, this can affect Macs, as Macs do look for certain attributes in extended schemas. This is a holdover from the 10.5 and 6 days, if I'm not mistaken, where one of Apple's recommended methods of managing Macs via policy was to extend the Active Directory schema to include attributes that the Mac would understand and then apply similar to MCX policy. So a lot of those hooks are still out there. So it's something to be aware of. So if you start binding Macs to your domain and you start seeing odd behavior, settings all of a sudden locked out that shouldn't be, this might be the cause. Oops. And always, 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 if possible, test in production. Or at least have a testing system that has a couple of machines in a production environment that people can poke at to see what breaks. As many people have said, you will never, ever find things, all the things that'll break on a new system like this until you put it into the hands of your fellow teammates and rank and file employees in your organization. It's, it could be a VM, even on their own system if they've got enough horsepower to support it. It's, test your build process, test what Active Directory, strict binding, or even casual binding is going to do. Make sure that when their password expires, they can go in and change it still. Or if they need their password reset, make sure that they're able to get back in to get things back up and running once your help desk has reset it for them, and make sure everything syncs up again. Figure out what happens in these situations. It's effectively just preventing headaches for yourself later on. So I think that's the bulk of it. I do have included some helpful links, which I will be posted once the slides are posted. I hope you all enjoyed my relatively quick overview of Active Directory, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Have you deployed Nomad in the wild yet?
I have 3 test subjects out there. Mostly bare bones install, but so far it has worked extremely well for simple password changes, and in one case, a password reset. The notifications seem to be accurate, although I'll be honest, in my case, there seems to be something up, although that could be our Active Directory. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to talk to our own internal Active Directory guys yet, but we're supposed to be on a 90-day password reset cycle, and the last 2 times I've reset my password, it's been 61 days. So I have no idea. But yeah, other than that, Nomad has been lightweight. It's there when you need it, and my next phase of testing is going to be adding support links to it so they can get directly into our ticketing system, or opening an email to email our ticketing system. I haven't figured out which one yet. In one case, I'm going to set up password sync so that when they change their AD password, it automatically synchronizes their local account password so that they're one and the same.
We've been testing it too. That works really well.
It does?
Surprisingly, yeah.
Cool.
Are your test subjects, are you binding the machine to AD as well?
All of my test subjects are not strict bound. The last group I have of Macs that are bound aren't going to be on Macs for too much longer. So yeah, I'm not bothering. Unfortunately for them. So,
nice.
Yep.
Do you have any tools that you use for? I have a mix of BYOD and non-BYOD devices. So the BYOD devices is their own personal local account. And this is students K through 12.
Right.
But they still have Active Directory to authenticate to print servers and website and all that, and AD6 with Google for all of that.
Yep.
So do you have any tools for password resets for a machine that's not actually bound but still needs AD credentials to get to other?
Not specifically. I have, of the clients that I have that have BYOD Macs, they don't actually have a domain yet. They're a small startup, so that's one of our future state projects. So it's coming. And in those cases, what I plan on doing is building an installer package with Nomad and a config profile. I will leave off local password sync, but this way they'll at least be able to get to VPN, change their password, interact with AD, and authenticate that way. Because most likely they're an Office 365 shop, and most likely their AD is going to be tied to Office 365, so there's password sync between the two. But yeah, as far as tools for that, I mean, I had given it some thought ages ago, and the best solution we had at the time was, at least for password changes, was opening up password change through OA.
Yeah, or G Suite. So, I mean, there's other ways through like Microsoft Remote Access, like
Yeah, remoting into it.
Or just like that service on the server, you can actually
Yep.
get to a password reset without having to change it.
Right.
Or messing around with. So I figured I'd pick your brains.
Yeah, no, it's something I haven't come up against in a while. So I don't have any modern tools, but going forward, that's my plan is giving them a package installer, which will provide them with VPN in a profile to control Nomad, and that way they can VPN in, change their password when they need to. Although in most cases, I don't think they're going to be accessing much in the way of internal resources. So.
Joel mentioned in the Nomad Slack, as well as the webinar, he had a couple webinars last week. And one of the things they're working on is Nomad for non-AD services like Okta and G Suite's on the list.
Okay, cool.
They're going to work on it. I think it's at the bottom of the list because he's going for some of the others first. Because I guess their API is not, it's very hard to work with. But
I'm not sure it is. Yeah.
it sounds like that's coming.
New choice to click.
Yeah, I do remember hearing at least about a lot of the identity managers, the Okta, and I think Duo was on the list.
Duo does two-factor, right? I think.
Or no, not Duo.
One login.
Ping.
Might have been Ping or one login. This was one of the webinars from I think 3-4 weeks ago.
He moves quickly.
Yes. Yeah, and responds quickly to feature requests too. So if there's something that you need to, or you would like to see integrated with Nomad, hop on the Nomad channel in the MacAdmins Slack and put it out there. So a lot of the stuff has been integrated. I've seen cases within weeks. So.
If I may too,
yeah.
Nomad 1.1 is in late beta right now, and some of the cool features, one of them is being able to specify file shares that people can pull the menu down and access file shares that you set with arbitrary names based on their AD groups. And the other is being able to have a dive into the keychain, find keychain items you specify, and when the password is changed, not only change the keychain password, but actually go into the items in the keychain and change your Outlook password, your Apple Mail password, whatever you want, so that the user isn't now then bombarded with a bunch of incorrect password keys. Enter the new password.
That's awesome.
Cool. Yeah, I hadn't realized it was in late beta yet. These days.
Oh yeah. We were just.
I need that yet a year ago.
Yeah.
So we have students on a Windows print server, and if their password expires, we have to go into the keychain and delete it from the keychain.
Yep.
Because even if they reset their password.
I think one of the other things is that Nomad, for anything that's not AD, like Okta, One Login, etc., that's going to be a paid application.
Mm-hmm.
The basic Nomad, which only does AD, is still going to be free. Which Enterprise Connect, which is sort of the competitor, but not as feature-rich as Nomad is going to be. That it requires I think it's now, what is it now? $5,500 outlay for professional services. But that includes a 2-day on-site visit from a professional services engineer. Since it's not an main Apple product, it comes out of professional services. So you're basically, you pay for them to come out, and you get Enterprise Connect for free for having them come out. It's essentially how they work. So. One of the other things I wanted to mention, when the trust breaks between the Macs, usually, especially if you have a large mobile fleet, Apple sets the default when it wants to rotate the computer object password 14 days. Microsoft recommends that be set to 30 days. So that's one area that you want to look at. That usually requires adding a line to whatever valuing script you do to set that. You can also set it to 0, which will never take the password. So you can eliminate the broken binds that way as well. Some people have run that. We changed it to 30 days and eliminated a lot of the broken binds. We still get them, but 30 days have reduced it by quite a significant amount. So again, that's one of those things to test in an organization. And one of the things to be aware of when you're first starting out, especially now that we know about it. So if you're going to be strict binding, make sure you change that particular value. So. All right.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I mean, we can go back to open discussion at this point, unless we want to discuss anything that's under NDA. If that's the case, we'll end the live stream. Okay.
I was just going to, again, touch on 1Password thing.
Right.
If anyone is looking at 1Password, LastPass, or any of the top 5 password managers out there, if someone gets a hold of your vault, there are software bundles out there to crack that password. None of them have really been able to crack it within a reasonable amount of time until Elcom Soft came out with this most recent one called just distributed password recovery. What that does is it actually now allows you to utilize not only your GPUs, so if you know of anyone that has a massive GPU rig, you could crack the password that way, or you can rent the cloud using the EC2 from Amazon Web Services, which is graphics processing, and you can actually crack the password within a couple minutes. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is it's not exclusive just to 1Password. It's LastPass. There's a few other ones that are listed, but FileVault is on here. Your actual Apple account, your Windows, your anything you have a password connected to, shares, internet key exchanges, TrueCrypt, BitLocker. And it's for 5 clients, it's $600. So if you guys are looking at 1Password, LastPass, stuff like that, just remind your users not to put highly sensitive stuff in there, because if someone does get your vault, someone can pay $600 and be able to get your data relatively easy.
There you have it. Anybody have anything else? If that's the case, we can end the live stream. And, so thank you all for joining us on the live stream. And we'll see you again soon.
A month or two.